Marketer of the day, number 484. Reassess, re-engage, and reaffirm to re-succeed. Gratitude, baby steps, and building success habits with James Colburn. Hey everyone, we're so glad that you're listening. We're having a conversation right now with James Colburn, and James, my apologies, James is the author of a book called Re-Succeed, Create an Extraordinary Future While You Sleep by using the 5-minute epic evening ritual. And James shares insight into the purposeless epidemic and breaks down the transformational evening ritual that's helping people reclaim their lives and find true happiness. So James is going to tell us all about things like why he threw away his to-do list and what high achievers need to know. So James, glad to be talking to you right now.
Hey, thank you for having me out today. It's great to be here. And shoot, I mean, we don't have enough time to totally unpack this book, but I think there's some value there, some real quick kind of aha moments that I went through that hopefully maybe some of your listeners resonate with.
Yeah, I mean, I love the aha moments. I love the real stuff. Who wants to hear about a bunch of theory, a bunch of facts and figures? Like, we want to hear about, when you fell into a ditch metaphorically and dug yourself out of it. So, I mean, you have this great book. I mean, what would you say is like the number one thing about it, or what sort of jumps out at you as far as this thing?
Well, I mean, the big thing for me was just a realization that I tended to attach myself or assign my identity to the things that I was great at, which is pretty typical. It means the things that were, rewarded for or paid well for or acknowledged for. I mean, it's not all money. I mean, you could be great at being a volunteer. You could be, great at being a parent. You could be great at being a salesperson. And I mean, the list goes on. But I think we sell ourselves short. I mean, I certainly experienced that for myself, is that I was kind of chasing after what I thought was, if you will, a finish line. And at one point in my life, I realized that there actually isn't a finish line. I mean, there's not bleachers with people cheering and like a checkered flag in life. It's like it's an unfolding journey, and this thing that we're chasing after. I remember I quoted one of the guys I worked for at one point in my book, and he saw me kind of racing through my day and through my week and through my year, and he said, "James, what are you in such a rush for? Because when you get there, then what?" And it really kind of just dawned on me at one point that this whole chase thing, although valiant, certainly beneficial for my family, for myself, needed a little bit more. And as high achiever, highly successful individuals, we tend to be really great at goal setting and holding ourselves accountable to the metrics. But sometimes we forget to build fulfillment into our lives, not just yearly, but daily. So that's really kind of the cliff notes of my book Re-Succeed, and it's really was just something that I felt needed to come out of me, because I'm sure I'm not the only person that struggled with this kind of chase for more without really answering the question, or the question of why.
Right. I can definitely relate to that. And it's a little scary to think about, just that, well, we set out and we say, well, I have to have all these goals. I have to be moving a mile a minute. I have to do all these things. And then when we kind of get going at first, we're like, well, I don't even care what motivates me, just as long as like something does. And that seems like that works for a while. But then, like you said, once you hit the milestone, you hit what you think was the finish line, you're like, oh geez, now there's more to do. And it's like, do I just keep doing more and more, or do I act, get some perspective, or do I figure out, what fulfills me? And so, I mean, yeah, it sounds like this is a really common problem, a really easy trap to fall into. So, I mean, what the heck do we do? Where's even the starting point to get our head straight?
Well, it's funny that you would ask that, because I actually hired a best-selling author on Amazon, best-selling self-published author on Amazon, to kind of assist me in getting me through the final chapters of my book. And I kind of told him the concept of the book, if you will, and he he said, James, thank you, but now I just kind of want to go and blow my head off. I mean, this sounds like a real uh, epidemic, and yet I don't really have a solution because I'm not hearing a solution. Well, I said, well, I've got a solution. I just haven't gotten to it yet. The solution is this thing that I do in the evening. He said, well, what's that? And I said, well, what I do is I simply, instead of, retooling my to-do list for tomorrow, and instead of creating this massive list of tasks for myself to mull over through my entire sleep, instead of doing all the typical things that I used to do, what I do is I just write down what I call 3 great questions on a 3x5 card. And I resist the kind of overachiever desire to answer those questions. I write them down on a 3x5 card and I just go to sleep. And I let this magic happen while I sleep, this kind of creative subconscious that shows up. And we've all slept on a big decision. And so what I'm doing is I'm kind of working on that sleep on it muscle every single evening over 3 questions while I sleep. I believe you get access to the creative subconscious through this, and that's scientific. And we deal with, we come up with answers differently while we're asleep than when we're awake. And then also we have access to what I call the miraculous, so that kind of creator of the universe influence in our lives when we let go and surrender just for a moment to the questions that we don't have the answers yet to.
Well, very interesting. So what are these 3 questions, and is it the same question every night? Does it change? Is it just what you're working on? I'm really curious about what these 3 questions are you're writing down.
Yeah. So first of all, the book is broken up into 3 sections of types of questions, but really they're, the book helps you with that, and there's examples just to kind of kick it off, but really those questions come from us, and they're around, for example, I broke it into what I call the 3 re's. So there's the reassessing question, the re-engaging question, and then the reaffirming question of re-succeeding, or the 5-minute epic evening ritual that I have created. And so a reassessing question, a re-engaging, and a reaffirming question. So you don't have to memorize all that. Really, there are things that we don't have the answer to, that when we just get quiet 5 minutes before we go to sleep, and we say, hey, what is right in front of my eyes that I don't even see, that's an amazing opportunity that I can act on tomorrow? That's a question. What small thing am I not grateful for that if I was grateful for, it would change the entire lens of how I view my relationship with my spouse, my relationship with my children, my relationship with my boss, or my view of future opportunities. So this is taking a closer look at your unlived life, if you will. And the book lays it out, or you can actually download a free PDF on my website, which kind of really lays out the act of asking these questions, and it gives you a few examples of questions you could ask, but they're actionable. And then what I realized is you can't bully yourself. Like I used to write down, when are you going to get your butt to work out, right? Like I was actually bullying myself into going to work out. Well, you know what happens. We actually rebel against ourselves, just like you would rebel against a kind of a disgruntled boss.
Right.
And so I realized that your questions and your languaging, you have to be kind to yourself. You need to see yourself with gentle eyes, if you will.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And what you're making me think of, and like I haven't thought about this for maybe like 20 years, but when I was a kid and I'd play baseball, my dad for some reason thought that the way to motivate me was like to always yell at me constantly, and then during that period of my childhood, whenever I had to deal with anything like a test or like bringing the mail back from the mailbox and it was super windy and I had to hang on to it, like that I was bullying myself in my own head because I just gotten so used to the yelling as the sort of I guess the motivation are sort of what was supposed to be the motivation. Like it ended up kind of becoming part of in my head, and I was just super harsh on myself. And it was like it seemed like at first it was more powerful than being nice, but it definitely didn't last. It definitely burned out. So I mean, and what's great about this is I've heard about this concept like a little bit, the whole like, ask a question at night and let the computer in your brain kind of crank the gears and do its own thing. But I had tried it and it hadn't worked for me because it was sort of in a problem solving practical concept. So like I'd heard it from a copywriter who said like, well, if you're making a web page and you don't know what headline to put on your web page, just like write down on a piece of paper like what should my headline be, and then go to sleep when you'll wake up with a headline. And it seemed like it didn't work. And as you're explaining like your technique, which I mean I think is like light years better, it sounds like I had been trying to think of something practical, and then it seems like your subconscious is better at maybe thinking more in terms of like abstract emotional things as opposed to what's this exact sentence I need to think of. Is that on the right track?
Although I think you might even be speaking of Dan Kennedy with the psychocybernetics.
It was Gary Bencivenga.
Oh yeah. Well, there is something to be said for just kind of again surrender even on a headline. Because here's the thing, as high achiever, highly successful individuals, we think we have to go and come up with all the answers. We think we have to do it. We think it's weak to surrender to the fact we don't have some answers. And yet, when we let go finally and ask questions that we don't have answers to, and then resist, because by the way, the first thing you'll want to do is when I first started this, I write down the 3 questions on my 3x5 card and I immediately start trying to answer them.
Right.
But what you need to do, what you need to resist the desire to do is answer them, but instead just go to sleep, tuck yourself in, go to sleep, let the creative subconscious go to work. And I use these extra thick 3x5 cards that I got on Amazon, and then that card kind of sticks with me throughout the next day in the car or in my back pocket. Then I keep the cards. I go over them at the end of the month, and I'm just amazed at the answers to the most unanswerable questions that show up. And there is such a muscle as sleeping on it. And so as you work this muscle, the miraculous and the creative subconscious go to work, and it's a game changer for me, because I used to clutter my brain with all these things I need to do and frustrations that I needed to kind of overcome in the next day, never just releasing myself from that and surrendering to the fact that I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to hear them.
Sort of spooky, a new way of thinking. So you have this extra thick 3x5 card, and you write the reassessing question, the re-engaging question, and the reaffirming question. And does it just remain those 3 questions? Like the next morning, do you write answers, or are they just 3 questions that you carry around with you?
Well, sometimes I'll write down an answer. Sometimes I might get answers to 2 of the 3 questions. And then to answer your question, those questions do change on a nightly basis. I don't ask the same question every single day. It's just kind of what's going on. Sometimes it's what's a way for me to better engage with my family, and I'll ask that question. Sometimes I will ask that question in the car on the way home on a Friday night. So sometimes I kind of preempt even the 5 minutes before you go to sleep thing, and I'll say, how can I fully engage starting the second I walk in the garage door when I get home tonight, and then not answer it, but wait for that answer, right? Like seriously, this life is not as one-dimensional as we think it is. There's more at work, and by allowing ourselves to not have all the answers, by forgiving ourselves for not having all the answers, or giving ourselves permission, if you will, to not have all the answers, that's where the juice shows up. It's kind of like, Roberts, the best way to describe it is that it's when you make something happen versus when it happens without you making it happen. You know what I mean? Like there's a different experience and I didn't even make it happen, and it happened, right? Like how you met a significant person in your life, or a business opportunity that showed up that you didn't even make happen.
Right.
there's just this grace and this blessing that kind of washes over you in those moments. And sometimes they're very rare, but you can kind of increase the odds by asking questions and not answering. I'm just waiting for that answer through the evening.
Yes, it seems like a more kind of peaceful life. Seems like it doesn't solve everything, but it seems like it's a great way to clear the chaos and not be stressed out about stuff that's not going to matter in a couple of years. Seems like it gives you the perspective, and like you said, even if there's not a clear solution to certain problems, at least it focuses your attention on things like, how do I connect better with my family, things like that. It kind of, at least makes you aware of what you should be at least chipping away at, right?
Yes, yeah. And I mean, it really, that what I realized is that this whole highly successful, high achiever individual that I am, and the people that I coach and I work with are all struggling to be that. There's reasons behind that, and sometimes those reasons are, again, thinking that there's a finish line, or trying to prove that we're enough, or that someday we'll be enough. And my big aha is that I realized, hey, what if instead of living a life where you're not enough, but hopefully someday in the future you will be enough? What if instead we live a life where we're already enough, where we believe we truly already are enough, and we show up in that spot? Now, that doesn't mean we're perfect, doesn't mean that we haven't made horrible decisions. It means despite our frailty, despite our poor decisions, we were enough the moment we made our first cry. We were enough when we arrived, right? And in that enoughness, what if we show up in our business or with our family already enough, not trying to prove, but just live in that enoughness? And so when you go to sleep and ask 3 great questions, not having the answer, resisting the desire to answer those questions, almost like, in a way, it's almost like saying, hey, I'm enough even though I don't have the answers, but I'm willing to hear those. Like, it's kind of like when something not so great happens. I changed my lens on this. So I'll have something not so great happen. I don't believe in saying, well, everything happens for a reason. Instead, I'll say something like, everything's perfect, but it's my job to figure out why. So what I mean by that is that there's lessons even in the challenges in our life, but I need to open my eyes up, ask those great questions, and figure out why it's perfect, right? Like when we look back at our life and we look back at those kind of challenging times, it starts to really make sense. Like, well, if that happened and then this happened and then all of a sudden this happened, and it never would have happened unless that challenging time happened, right? And so just kind of changing our lens, being okay with not having all the answers, believing we are already enough, and in that enoughness showing up. And I'm not saying make less money. I'm saying you will make actually more money as you become more of a whole person.
That's a really great message. So basically, give yourself a break, right?
Thank you. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And it kind of brings to mind, like, there's some kind of saying where, like, if you have a really bad attitude, you can be in a whole rose garden that's beautiful, and you'll find the one thorn in the whole garden if that's what you're looking for. So, I mean, if things are bad and you don't have your head in the right place, and you won't even appreciate when things get out of being bad. So one thing that kind of you got my curiosity with a little bit here is, I noticed in your bio that you used to be in real estate and used to sell tens of millions of dollars in real estate each year, and then now it seems like you're kind of a lot more enlightened than maybe making a lot of money and having that facade, the success on the outside, being unhappy on the inside. So did things ever reach a breaking point? Did things get like really bad so that you had to come up with this stuff to get yourself out of it?
Well, what the breaking point is that I made $1.2 million one year, and I had sold 120 houses. And on Christmas Eve, I was sitting in our vacation home, which we didn't have a TV, so I was just kind of staring out the window at the water. and my kids were playing in their bedroom, and my wife and my mother-in-law were cleaning up after dinner. And I was staring at the window, and if you were looking at me, you'd think I was living the dream. But instead, I was just trying to will my phone to ring. I wanted to write one more offer. I wanted to sell one more house. And not that I needed the money, but that I was lost in the transactions of life. And even on Christmas Eve, I couldn't, as you put it, give myself a break. And I thought, man, James, you have derailed, and you don't even have a solution. I mean, the only way you can fix this is to sell another house, to get another dopamine hit, if you will, right? So I ran down to Costco and I bought a TV with a DVD integrated into it, and turned it on in my house just to get my mind off of the fact that my phone wasn't ringing. And I thought, well, next year, shoot, I need to work on this. This isn't right. This isn't healthy for me. I sold 120 houses, made 1.2 net that year. Why the heck can't I just, why can't, as you put it, give myself a break? And it's because I had chased after kind of, if you will, the goals in the metrics, but I had never, ever figured out a way to build fulfillment into my daily life, or at least, or insist upon it. Well, so the next year I hired this coach because I believe there's nothing better than having someone on a weekly basis to talk to. And to strategize with, and someone to hold you accountable. I hired this coach, and she said, what's our plan? What am I going to be? What am I hired for? And I said, well, your job is to help me make another $300,000 a year. I want to go from 1.2 to 1.5. Well, of course, the first thing that most people realize is James hasn't learned anything. Now he's still trying to quench this whole not enough thing with making another 300, so now you can go to 1.5. Like that, everything that the bar graph will always continuously go up, right in your life. And she said, well, that's interesting that you want to make another $300,000, and that's a nice number, 1.5, but I have one question for you. I said, well, what's that? I'm thinking, what does she get? I don't, there's no question here. I'm hiring her to help me make $300,000. If she can't do that, I'm the boss here. She said, the question is this: do you play Legos with your kids? And I said, well, I got to be honest with you. Whenever I get down on my hands and knees and I play with my kids, I think about the million things I need to be doing, or people I need to be prospecting to sell more homes. In fact, the stillness of playing with my kids reminds me of all the things I'm not doing. So the answer is no, I don't play Legos with my kids. She said, James, here's the deal. You can make 1.5, 2 million, $2.5 million, $3 million, but you can only do that. And I can only help you when you can play Legos with your kids and enjoy it.
Oh, wow.
And so there was this moment, the breaking point there, as you put it, kind of like, one person called it like getting kicked off the treadmill, because we're on a treadmill. So we all need to be kicked off the treadmill. A friend of mine calls it. Hey, it's like not how we're doing when we're on the treadmill. It's when we get kicked off, and we didn't want to be kicked off, right? And so, of course, that soon after the market crashed and my income went down. And what I realized in that shift in the market was that when my income went down, it didn't change anything. I was still just chasing after more, right? Relentlessly. It didn't matter what the more was. It just was a chase for more. And I started asking the question, like, I think she's got onto something here. Like, if there's not fulfillment, like if you can't build fulfillment, like simply playing Legos with your kids, right? Like there's years I don't remember of their lives, right? And that should bum me out more than not making another 300. So that's why I say you don't make less, you make more, because you become more whole. And so that was the shift for me. And there's a whole lot more to that story. And I wrote a book about it.
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, that's some deep stuff. You kind of took us on a little bit of a journey there. And as you were explaining, like the mindset that you were in and those difficulties, it almost sounded like being a drug addict, right? Like instead of going after cocaine or something, it was like the money, the success, and like no amount would be enough. And it's like always on your mind. It's like, oh, that's like That's a
So,
really scary place to be.
well, I had a builder that I worked with, and he actually, when the market crashed, and he was so addicted to either buying in, when it was a buyer's market, or selling new construction when it was a seller's market. And he was so addicted to to be honest with you, with the drug, right, the adrenaline drug, which is a true drug coursing through our veins, right? Um, he was so addicted to it that when it got taken away, he actually went on. He had to go into antipsychotic medicine through the down market just to get through it, because he lost his drug. So if not managed, yeah, you've got an issue on your hand, because we're all addicted to something. And for some of us, it's adrenaline, dopamine, ego, constant upward arrow on the bar graph. And life doesn't promise that. There's ups, there's downs. What goes up goes down. But guess what? What goes down goes up.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have that perspective and that ability to handle things, and it makes me think of like back in the 1920s when the Great Depression happened. Like people were like throwing themselves out of buildings, and it's like it's just money.
Yeah.
You lost money. It's not a reason to get so upset, stressed out that you end your life. But I mean, I can also relate to kind of being stuck in the middle of it and having this trouble of not being able to think your way out of it. So one thing that I'm always curious about with this subject of like becoming more enlightened and in tune to yourself and stuff is like, is there a way to have our cake and eat it too? Is there a way to be happy and fulfilled and know what we need to do, but also be able to maybe turn on the workaholic switch, so to speak, and get a bunch of stuff done, make a bunch of money, and then flick it back off when we're done? Is that possible or doable?
Well, I mean, it's interesting that the question, the way you framed it, it's almost like you can't have that peace, if you will, or you can't ask questions that you don't have the answer to, and be a workaholic and make lots of money. So I think as you work on this, you get a bit of a more of a balance in your thinking, if you will, not in your habits. You're still a taskmaster. You're still waking up. You're still holding yourself highly accountable. You're still heavily focused on, the return on investment, if you will, of your day, right? So that hasn't changed. I'm simply saying integrate in 5 minutes just before you go to bed the opportunity, right, of asking 3 great questions that you don't have the answer to. So yes, you can be Robert all day long, right? But 5 minutes before you go to bed, you deserve this, right? And what I realized by doing this, just like when New Year's resolution time, right? So person says, I want to work out, I want to be more fit in 2018. So the first week you go to the gym and you don't want to do anything, right? So I say just go to the gym. Just literally go to the gym, look at the treadmill, flick it off, right? Say, screw you, I'm not going to get on you. And then just go home, right? For one whole week, right? By week 2, right, you're like, well, I'm here, I might as well do 15 minutes on this treadmill, right? I'll watch a show while I'm doing it, right? And by week 3, this is habit building. This is a habit building process. Same idea with asking 3 great questions. All of a sudden, you're asking 3 great questions, and all of a sudden you realize, hey, I deserve to come down more from the day so that I'm fully prepared for to get these answers. So I need to turn off my TV a little earlier. I need to stop eating a little bit earlier. I need to be off the screens a little bit earlier in the evening. A lot of people, I think we're all basically starved for sleep. That's a whole completely different epidemic that we get not enough sleep, because especially high achiever, highly successful individuals, we can't bargain with the morning. We have to wake up at a very certain time, typically. Right. But the evening is happy hour, and you open a bottle of wine. It's like, hey, I can't drink day old wine tomorrow. I got to finish this bottle. And falling asleep on the couch, and this is the lifestyle. right? Going to sleep too late or and not getting enough sleep, and then you can't bargain with the morning, so you have to wake up, and then day after day after day. And so what I say is just like the workout, just adding in like a workout, and how little by little better habits occur. Like you're working out, you're like, well, I really should eat better too. And I really should drink more water too, right? Well, the same idea with you're asking three great questions just 5 minutes before you go to sleep. You're going to be asking questions to yourself as well about what else am I doing to get in my way of a restful sleep? Because if you just slept better and didn't have all these crazy ideas coursing through your mind in the evening, right? You would simply be more productive in the day, make more money, even if that's all that came of the 5-minute epic evening ritual.
I love it. And what I'm hearing here is like just baby steps to build the habit. So that it seems like just the sort of the picture you painted here is like this high achiever, I guess, stereotype. It seems like it's kind of built on a house of cards, right? Because it's like you need to have the energy drink to wake up, and then you need to have the wine to get off to like wind down the energy drink when you fall asleep, and then you don't sleep that great because of the energy drink and the wine, and then you're running around, and there's only time for fast foods because everything's jam-packed schedule, and then you don't have time to exercise, which then hurts your health, and then you don't drink enough water, and like all these things that are just a huge array of bad habits, but also that they're interrelated. I can't get rid of this one thing because then there's all these other bad habits I have. So instead of trying to solve the whole thing at once, we just develop these small, simple bad habits. And I love that idea of just going to the gym intending not to even work out, but just to make that little bit of progress to go to the gym. And then once you begin to work out a little bit, then you want to be a little better and stuff like that. So, I mean, I love this concept. I love this idea. And I know that, we've had this great conversation and we haven't been able to quite do the book justice, but can you tell us about where we can get the book along with any other links, resources you want to tell us about today?
Absolutely, Robert. And thanks again. So number one, you can go to Amazon, video, Kindle, or paperback. You could leave me a review. That would be huge. If you want to just get 3 free chapters of the book, you can go to my website, which is James, C-O-L, E as in boy, U-R-N.net.
Well, super great. So jamescolburn.net, go there and check out those free chapters, the book, and get your life kind of positioned and going the way that you want, so that way it's actually sustainable, you're happy, and everything that comes with that. So great message, great stuff, great life lessons we got here. And I want to thank you so much, James, for stopping by and being open and honest with us. And everyone, make sure to check out that book, Re-Succeed, and you'll be glad you did. So thanks, James, for coming by, and I really appreciate you.
Thanks, Robert, and thanks to all your listeners.
Have you had a chance to rate and review the show yet? If not, go right now to marketeroftheday.com/iTunes. Click View in iTunes and click the Ratings tab. We would really appreciate a 5-star rating or whatever you think is fair, plus a quick 1-sentence review to tell us how we're doing. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.